Well, hi, everybody. Such a surprise to see you all here. Who could have thought that we would all just randomly gather on my channel at the same time on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern? It's just weird. Anyway, hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Glad you could join me. I see the chat is active. There's Dana screaming at me, TikTok Shives. It just, it wouldn't be. There are, of course, occasionally live streams, Ask Away live streams where Dana is not in the live chat because she has other stuff to do or whatever, which is fine. But it's just never the same without Dana in the chat screaming at me to get the show started. So, anyway, hi, everybody in the chat. Hi, Javastine. So you're getting as bad as Star Trek suddenly becoming political out of nowhere. Yes, exactly. Good morning. And so anyway, as usual, I will be answering questions that were submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you are with us in the live chat and you have something you want to talk about with me or a question you want to ask, or especially if you were planning on being generous and throwing in a super chat or something like that, if at all possible, please hold on to those until I get through the patron and member questions. And then I will play a stuffy short, and then I will turn my full attention to the chat for the rest of the show. So yeah, Geek, you know what? It's not quite the same, but sure, if you want to be the substitute, screamer about the time when Dana's not here, I would be happy for you to do that. So anyway, let's get started with the patron and member questions. And the first one of those comes from the illustrious David Colby, the noted David Colby, who says, I can't think of a name bit, so it's over. Fair enough. I was playing a video game called StarCraft 2, and I want you to imagine a scene from it. An alien, voiced by John Delancey, in full scenery-chewing camp evil villain voice, says the line, "Behold, slain the blade world of the Tal Darim. Here our death armada waits to bring devastation to the sector." Hearing this line unlocked a realization in my brain. The word Death Armada echoing in my head as time seemed to slow around me. We're fucking starved for space opera goofiness in mainstream pop culture. Like, do you know how staid and boring Star Wars is? Of course you do. You've seen Andor. Remember when Flash Gordon had a full Queen soundtrack and shirtless Hawkmen screaming "Dive!" as they attacked a laser-studded war rocket? I do. What happened, man? When did goofy over-the-top space opera become so rare? Like, people, we're throwing around laser swords and space magic. Have some fucking fun with this shit. Please. Look, I agree. I agree with you completely. I mean, I'm as big of a sucker for like a serious Star Trek story as anybody else, or a serious sci-fi story in general. But I am also a very strong advocate for, and I usually talk in terms of Star Trek because that's like, my favorite sci-fi fantasy franchise. But it applies to other things as well. But I mean, I am a big advocate for Star Trek embracing the silly side and admitting at least every once in a while how dumb the whole thing is. Like how wonderfully silly and dumb it is. Like I don't say those things about it to denigrate it. There's something inescapably silly about it, about the whole idea of it. And it doesn't hurt to lean into that, at least every so often, right? And same thing with Star Wars. And I mean, look, there were parts, and I always feel the need to make my feelings on Andor clear because Andor has a lot of people who really liked it. I'm not one of those people. When Andor did work for me, which was maybe 3 or 4 out of the 12 episodes, it was great. Like when it was hitting what it was trying to hit for me anyway, it was fantastic. It was splendid. But, those other 8 or 9 episodes were just, they were so boring that sometimes I would find myself laughing at just how fucking boring it was. Like nothing is fucking happening. Why are there 12 episodes of this show? Nothing is fucking happening. So yeah, and I mean, I would love it if Star Wars is probably even more. Star Wars is even more suitable for that kind of like space opera silliness, because Star Wars is even less moored to, you know, the serious side of science fiction than Star Trek is. Like Star Trek has little feathery tendrils connecting what it is to like hard sci-fi and plausible sort of speculative fiction. Not much, but it's there. There are things that are, if you squint and look at it the right way about Star Trek, they're kind of plausible, right? Star Wars is pretty much a fairy tale. Star Wars is mythology. Star Wars is not even remotely trying to be like hard science fiction. It is, you mentioned Flash Gordon, I mean, and obviously one of the major influences on Star Wars for George Lucas was Flash Gordon and was Saturday morning sci-fi pulp serials of the 40s and 50s. And, that's what Star Wars is. And it would not upset me at all to see Star Wars lean into that a little more than it does. So yes, we are in agreement, my friend. We're in agreement. See, as long as we don't mention Strange New Worlds or Lower Decks, we're like that. We're like that, and we're unstoppable. Matt L says, general thoughts, Steve. Am I wrong? No religion should be inextricably tied to a government. The Israeli government and Jewish people are different, but as you pointed out, people are scared to criticize the first out of fear for being accused of hating the second. Hamas's actions against civilians are bad, but I can understand. Think if the UN decided unilaterally to give Texas to Mexico, and over the next 50 plus years they expanded into Oklahoma. If the Mexican government shut down U.S. religions in Texas and racially discriminated, U.S. citizens affected would likely rise up like in Red Dawn, where the audience is supposed to cheer for terrorist Wolverines. In real life, Hamas are the Wolverines, yet they are vilified. To a Star Trek comparison, Hamas is the Maquis and the Israeli government are the Cardis, if the Federation had no control over the treaty. Just like in Deep Space Nine, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but the Maquis don't live in paradise. One genocide should not permit another. Hashtag Free Palestine. Yeah, I agree. Look, I am not going to go out of my way to praise Hamas or to make excuses for Hamas or to try and justify certainly what Hamas has done lately and other similar things that Hamas has done throughout its history. I am not a fan of them. I am not going to make excuses for them or apologize for them. But yes, one genocide does not justify another. And while what was done recently to Israel and to the people of Israel was absolutely unjustifiable and unwarranted and just over the top completely, and just, was an atrocity and was a crime against humanity, was actually multiple crimes against humanity. That doesn't give Israel, the government of Israel, the state of Israel, the right, the mandate to commit even worse crimes against humanity in retaliation. It just doesn't. And, I know that some people try to say, like, well, the response that I have seen a lot to this on Twitter and other social media, and also in the comments to my video about it, people saying, well, what are they supposed to do? Right? That's the counter argument to what I said. When people like me say, well, one side committing war crimes doesn't give the other side justification to commit war crimes against the first side. And the counter argument from a lot of folks who are more, staunchly on the pro-Israel side is, what are they supposed to do? I don't know. I don't know what they're supposed to do. I don't know. It's a shitty, impossible situation. I have no idea. Does Israel have the right to defend itself? Of course it does. Well, what should it do if not what it's doing now? I don't fucking know. I don't know. But I know that they should not be doing things like they are that result in the widespread deaths of thousands and thousands of civilians. The number I heard today was something like 7,000 civilians in Gaza have been killed since the IDF began its counteroffensive after the horrendous actions, the horrendous terrorist attacks and mass murder and taking of hostages of Hamas. which I think killed something like 12 to 1,400 people, which again is an atrocity, But Israel has now killed something like 7,000 civilians. So what is Israel supposed to do in response to Hamas's attack? Not that. I don't know what they're supposed to do. I don't know. You're asking the wrong guy. If you're asking for advice on what the IDF's strategy should be in responding to Hamas, I don't know, but it shouldn't be whatever they're doing that is causing 7,000 civilians and counting to die, including a whole bunch of kids. Something else. I don't know. I wish I knew the exact thing to say, but just asking, well, what else are they supposed to do is not a fucking counter argument. Anyway, Air One Fire, whose head is 500 years old, 500 years older than the rest of the body. You know, there's another guy that I think could say that at one point. Hi, Steve, sometime viewer, first-time member. Well, thank you very much. I started watching Star Trek because of your Trek Actually videos. No kidding. That's really cool. Previously, I only saw Star Trek 2009 and The Cage, which didn't pull me in. My reaction to TOS was, this is amazing, I gotta tell my friends. My reaction to TNG was, this is definitely a show, and then, this is great, but it's not TOS. I'm currently on season 6. I watched both shows concurrently with the Ensign's log. Shout out to Dana and Jason. Speaking of which, now that I'm sponsoring the U.S. military through your taxes, could you please stop your country from becoming a totalitarian dictatorship? We recently did that in my country, where I expected this month's election to be the last thing remotely resembling democracy, but with 74% turnout, we voted out the authoritarian government and got a huge majority in the Senate. The opposition is very diverse, but hopefully democratic. This is the reminder to everyone that hope is the thing with feathers and never stops at all. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving me reason to hope. How did you all get 74% voter turnout? Because I feel like if we could get turnout like that in this country, I would never say all of our problems would be over, because that's reductive and silly. And there are problems in this country that you couldn't just solve by winning a particular election or whatever. But if we could get 74% voter turnout on a regular basis, especially for non-presidential elections, holy shit, that would be transformative. I hesitate to say revolutionary, knowing that we have some revolutionaries in the chat, but it would be transformative if we had 74% voter participation in elections in the United States. That would be incredible. And the Republicans would never win another election if we had voter turnout that high. That's just, I feel like that's as close to a statistical fact as I can say without, it being an inarguable fact. Like it's, so yeah, if you could give us some pointers over here as to how to get 74% voter turnout in elections, that would be great. And yes, that's very encouraging and good for you. Congratulations. John Burns, why are morons insisting on nattering on about the Middle East? It's a war zone. The only way to change it is to carpet bomb the Middle East with nukes. No people, no war. Before you start whining about the people, what about the people when the Vikings arrived in Normandy? They weren't a problem anymore. I'll take $1 billion for my ingenious solution. Thank you very much. Okay, if you're going to be asking to be paid $1 billion to solve a conflict by committing a terrible atrocity, then you're going to need to apply for United States citizenship, John. Actually, I thought you were Canadian. This solution has the distinctively American ring of the kind of thing that a lot of us hear our racist know-it-all relatives, our uncles and aunts and cousins and such, say over the Thanksgiving table and the Christmas table every year. Are you sure that you're not from this country? You're from Canada. Maybe the United States is a bad influence on you all up there. I feel like maybe the worst of us is rubbing off on you, because it's been a while since I heard a non-American say something as absolutely fucking repugnant as we should carpet bomb the Middle East with nukes and then try to compare it to the Vikings who did not have nuclear weapons and did not have the capacity to commit mass murder on the scale of entire nations or continents. But yeah, no, that sounds like it's too, that solution is monstrous and in a not uniquely but a particularly American way, and it's a shame that Canadians are saying those sorts of things now. Black Cover 95. While thinking about the discussion of the ethics of using AI to recreate dead actors for movies, I thought of something related. What if we used this deepfake technology to recreate historical figures for biopics, etc.? Wouldn't that make them far more realistic than merely casting a vaguely resembling actor with heavy makeup? Well, there are a couple points here. You're still screwing actors out of jobs. I mean, unless you're just going to have actors be like stand-ins for the, and then, I mean, assuming the whole thing won't just be computer generated, right? If you're going to shoot it with physical actors, I guess you would have stand-ins, doing the scenes, and then you would deep fake their faces so they look like the historical figures. But it still sounds like it's still AI being used to screw actors out of work. The other thing is, who gives a shit how realistic it is? Like, I am not in the majority here, but when I watch a movie about something like about a piece of history, like a historical drama or whatever, and the characters are real historical figures, I don't give a shit if they look like the people or not. Like, if it's a really famous person or a person with a really distinctive look, it would be nice if they were maybe in the ballpark. But like, as long as it's a good story and they're giving a good performance, I don't care. I mean, Anthony Hopkins was remarkable as Richard Nixon. I thought Oliver Stone's Nixon movie was very good. And I thought Anthony Hopkins was great as Nixon. Looked nothing like him. Didn't bother me at all. Great movie. Didn't care whether he looked like him or not. The entire cast of Hamilton, like, none of them look anything like the characters they're playing. You ever see a picture of Alexander Hamilton, like a portrait, a painting? Dude looked nothing like Lin-Manuel Miranda. George Washington wishes he looked like Christopher Jackson. Well, maybe not. Maybe not entirely, but you know what I'm saying. Who gives a shit how realistic it is? I think we worry too much about that. If we didn't worry so much about it, we probably wouldn't need to do the heavy makeup. Like, just cast an actor who can play the role, who is more or less in the ballpark of, the physical appearance, and go with that. Like Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln, right? You look at him, it's like, okay, he's, I can kind of see how you can get to Lincoln from how he naturally looks. They did his hair, he grew a beard. They might have done like a nose piece or something. I'm not sure what exactly was involved in making him up to look like Lincoln, but it's not like he was buried under pounds and pounds of prosthetics. He was mostly just Daniel Day-Lewis with a beard, and he dressed like Lincoln, and he talked like Lincoln. And when people talked to him in the movie, they said, "Hey, Mr. Lincoln." And we bought it because, it was close enough. He looked like Abraham Lincoln. So no, I don't think I think you miss the point. Like, even historical fiction or a historical drama, if it's done artfully, then even though it's based on real people and real events, it's still interpretive. You're not, the idea isn't to create the impression that, like, the audience is somehow gazing back in time and watching real events as they happen. That's impossible. That's a foolish goal, because it'll never happen. It's completely impossible. We're never going to get there. The best we can do is tell stories and interpret history in ways that are accessible to modern audiences, and tell modern audiences things about historical events and historical people that they find interesting, that they find compelling and engaging, and involve them in a good, well-told story. that is based on history. And maybe they'll learn something, maybe they won't, maybe they'll be inspired to go read a history book or take a class or something and learn more about the real history, or watch a documentary that is focused more on relating the, just the facts. But even documentaries are interpretive, But yeah, the whole idea of, we can use deep fakes to make actors in biopics look exactly like the historical figures. Who cares? Who cares? Completely misses the point of telling a story, making a film, what have you, even if it is based on history. Some random geek reminding everyone it's Ace Week, Mutter Fluffers. So, Steve, I talk a lot about Joanna's, Phoenix's, and Joey's situations, right? How they are in poverty, have to rely on donations from others to survive, basically begging online in order to live. Their situations are not sustainable. Even Naz and Linequin are still asking for money for bills and food. Info and charity links has been updated. Let's face facts. Joanna, Phoenix, Joey, and even Naz and LQ are forever going starving, suffering at the risk of having internet or power shut off, or just need to raise money for their basic necessities. Pretty much they all need a wealthy benefactor to support them, and what fucking chance is that going to happen to my friends? At this point, that is more likely to happen than a UBI. Even if a UBI does come, it won't be enough because it will just be here to keep capitalism alive. Remember, capitalism is why I think that's supposed to be my friends, is why my friends are begging in order to live. Steve, what chances do my friends have to survive in this world? Know any wealthy benefactors? Unfortunately, I don't. I hear cranberry juice is good for a UBI, though. No, I'm kidding. Well, here's the thing. As always, I sympathize and I understand why you feel the way you do. And I wish I did know a whole bunch of wealthy benefactors that I could point in your direction and all of your friends' direction, but I don't. UBI would probably not by itself spell the end of capitalism, but a universal basic income system would, if properly instituted and made available to, or formulated in a way that it would help people who are at the very bottom economically, who need to beg, as you say, to pay the bills. If it was created in such a way as to help lift them up so that at least there's a basic floor that everybody is not allowed to, go beneath, then, I mean, yeah, there would still be capitalism. The current system would still be largely unchanged, but it would be, it would be a much better situation for your friends, right? I mean, I feel like we should certainly be advocating for such a system, even if you believe that ultimately things will not be where they need to be until we do away with capitalism altogether. Like, you can, believe that should still be the goal, but advocating for universal basic income in the meantime as a more attainable goal in the short term, or the relatively short term, I think it's still going to be a very long time before we have something like that. Unfortunately, I support universal basic income. But, it doesn't mean that you can't advocate for that and push for that while you are still holding off, having the long-term goal of a more significant, more radical change. But yeah, I mean, look, UBI is more likely now than it was 10 years ago in this country, because people talk about it. And the more people talk about it, and the more people who regard it as plausible, and then those people vote and share their thoughts and feelings with their elected representatives, or maybe even some of those people run for office and become elected representatives themselves, the more plausible it becomes, So let's keep that process going, is what I say about UBI. Brian McKinley, who spends an inordinate amount of time trying to come up with questions for Ask Away. I know someone else who has that problem. Hello again, Steve. As bad as the current right wing of the Supreme Court is, they have actually ruled against Trump's interests in several cases so far. It's also been noted that with Trump's clear aspirations to concentrate power in the executive branch, should he gain the presidency again, that he will effectively be a dictator, and dictators have no need for a Supreme Court to interpret the law. given all that, what do you think the chances are of Trump being disqualified from the ballot when the case inevitably goes before the Supreme Court? Very, very, very unlikely, I think. And keep in mind, I'm just a dipshit with a YouTube channel. I have no special insight into this. I'm just sort of sharing my gut feeling on this, but I think it is extremely, vanishingly unlikely that the Supreme Court will disqualify Trump as a candidate before the election. I really don't think that's going to happen. And I mean, the argument you make that, well, if Trump gets reelected, then he could, consolidate power in the executive branch and, and block the court, or maybe even find a way to do away with the court. And of course, the Supreme Court wouldn't want to see that happen, so they'll kick him off the ballot so that won't happen. I don't think the Supreme Court justices are worried about that. Like, I don't think most, if any, of the Supreme Court justices see that as a likely scenario. So I don't think that they would be motivated to rule in any particular way because of it. So no, I don't think Trump being disqualified by the courts, Supreme Court or otherwise, is very likely to happen at all. General Contact Unit problem child. So both you and some more news recently made videos about how TV and studio executives seem to be incapable of understanding why people like some works of fiction and dislike others. Like, their reaction to the Barbie movie's success is to commission a bunch of movies based on Mattel products, as if people liked that movie because of the branding rather than because it's just a good movie. I wonder if it's not that they don't understand people like movies better if they're good. It's more that good is hard to quantify and easily replicate, so they don't even bother trying. Like, figuring out what made the Barbie movie compelling to people is really hard, especially if you're fundamentally an uncreative businessman. Whereas it's easy to commission a bunch of movies with the same branding as the Barbie movie and hoping people see it because they assume it'll be like the Barbie movie. Yeah, I think I agree with you completely. I think it boils down to the lack of imagination and lack of creativity and lack of insight that most of the people running movie studios have, like, and I know I've told this story a million times, but I just told it in a video not too long ago, earlier this year, but it's my favorite example of the argument in 1967 about whether or not to give The Fugitive a final episode so that they could wrap up the story and the audience could find out, whether Dr. Kimball found the one-armed man or cleared his name or whatever. And it was actually another studio executive. It wasn't like one of the creators of the show. It was one of the studio executives at ABC who went to the head of the network, who went to the boss and said, hey, we should do a final episode of The Fugitive to, wrap up the story and everything. And the studio boss just had no idea what he was talking about. He was like, no, the show's over. Like, we're not doing it anymore. And the explanation or the argument was, well, yeah, but like our show, like The Fugitive had a particular story, and it was an ongoing story. Like, the hero was a guy who was falsely accused of a crime, and he spent a lot of the show like chasing the guy who he thought really did the crime, and he was also being chased by a police lieutenant who was trying to recapture him. Like, we have these ongoing storylines in our show, and like, if we just end the show without resolving that, then people are going to be disappointed. And if we do put up a special episode that resolves all those plot lines and we give the series a sense of closure, I think people will really watch it and really like it. And the studio executives were like, it was like they were speaking a different language. It never occurred to them that people might be invested in the show and actually care about what happens to the characters and care about what happens in the story. And 50 years later, I think a lot of people with that exact same mindset are still, different people, but the same mindset, are still running Hollywood, are running the movie business and the TV business. They see it as product. They see it as just a thing to sell. That's it. And they don't care what the content of it is. That's why they call it content, because it doesn't matter. As long as there's something in it, as long as you start the movie and something happens for 2 hours so you can charge people for a ticket, right? They don't give a shit. And a lot of them, I don't know if they even have the emotional intelligence to even be capable of giving a shit or understanding or having any insight into why people like particular movies and particular characters and even particular genres, like the least artistically inclined, least imaginative people are the ones in charge of the storytelling business, basically. And it makes no sense, but that's the way it is, because they're the ones that have the money and they're the ones that look at things purely in terms of dollars and cents. And it's a profit-driven business, which unfortunately means that it's run by people who say, oh my God, the Barbie movie made $1 billion globally. Let's do a whole bunch more movies based on Mattel toys, because clearly that was the reason that everybody went to see Barbie. Yeah. I saw that some more news, by the way. It was really good. Brett Walker, what do you see both for the future of Star Trek and of the ideals for the future of our society it portrays? Well, I mean, excuse me. I mean, in the short term, at least for the next several years, I see a lot more Star Trek. I mean, there are a whole bunch of Star Trek properties in production, new shows and new episodes of the current shows. And, I think Star Trek as a franchise, as a media property is going to be in production and around in terms of, making new stuff for a little while yet, for at least the next few years, I would guess. And in terms of the ideals for the future of our society, it would be nice to think we'll get there at some point. I'm not exactly sure what pace we're on. Like, I don't know if we are currently on pace to achieve something like the social conditions of Earth that we see in Star Trek by the 23rd or the 24th century. Like, I honestly don't know. If we do, I hope that we can somehow get there without requiring a third world war or some other, massive, devastating conflict. But who knows what the odds are on that? Like, long term, I'm optimistic. I don't think I'll live to see it. I don't think anyone alive today will live to see it. But I think someday it's at least plausible that we'll get there. That we'll achieve some kind of society that is at least kind of similar to what we see on Earth in Star Trek in terms of equality and in terms of, the end of economic exploitation and poverty. Whether that means an end to capitalism completely or not, I don't know. But I think we can eventually get to a point where poverty is, if not non-existent, at least incredibly rare. And, the working class is either not exploited or not as exploited or not exploited, very much at all compared to how they are now. And that there's equality along racial lines and gender lines, and queer people are not mistreated because of who they are. And, immigrants and people from different countries are not mistreated or mistrusted because of where they come from or what religion they practice or what language they speak or what have you. I think all of those things are possible. And I think we are moving in that direction on the large scale, like on the scale of decades and centuries. I think we are gradually inching toward that ideal, but it's going to take a very, very long time. And as we've seen over the last few years, there are going to be some pretty big setbacks along the way where we will make progress and then we will get knocked way back and we will have to, regain the ground we lost. That'll probably happen a whole bunch of times, unfortunately. But I think we'll get there eventually. And it's easy for me to say that because I'll be fucking dead anyway. Jason, the other one, if you were on a desert island, what would be your three dessert choices? Also, I have not heard about your input on Star Trek Prodigy coming back. What are your thoughts? Well, I'll take the second one first. I mean, I'm thrilled that Prodigy's coming back. I'm thrilled that Prodigy is going to be on Netflix and that the The first season that was previously released on Paramount Plus is going to be streaming on Netflix later this year. And apparently next year at some point, they're going to have season 2 up there. And who knows if it's a success, maybe they'll even get a third season. I think it's great because Prodigy is my second favorite of the current Star Trek shows. It's second to Strange New Worlds. And I would put it just a little bit ahead of Discovery because I do like Discovery, but Prodigy's fantastic, and I'm very happy that it found a new home. I always assumed that it would. Like, a lot of our fellow Trekkies were, I think, a little more upset than was reasonable. I mean, it was reasonable to be upset because it was taken off of Paramount Plus, and now there is no streaming way to watch it right now until it goes up on Netflix. So I understand people being a little pissed or a little annoyed. But I mean, Paramount always said we're shopping it around. Like we intend to find another place to put it. We're just not putting it on our streaming platform anymore. So I mean, I was never worried that it was going to just be memory hold and we were never going to see it again. Paramount made it clear that they were not doing to Prodigy what Warner Brothers did to the Batgirl movie and a bunch of other things that used to be on Max. So I expected that it would pop up somewhere again, and I'm glad that it has popped up on such a prominent platform as Netflix and relatively soon. So I'm really happy, and I can't wait to see new episodes. As for 3 dessert choices for the dessert island, okay. Red velvet cake. Some kind of berry pie, like a wild berry pie, like a blackberry cranberry pie, something like that, like a really good like tart berry pie. Ooh. And then maybe like a Frosty, or not a Frosty, like a Blizzard from Dairy Queen, like a chocolate chip cookie dough Blizzard from Dairy Queen. Maybe those would be my 3 dessert choices for the dessert island. Red velvet cake, definitely. Because that's my favorite. Michael Ridra, I've been laughing at what a buffoon Trump continues to be. How can I not? But behind the laughter, there's deep, absolute terror. For every $1,000 he's fined for breaking the law, he gets $1 million in donations from his cult. He sells merch with his mugshot on it. The party of personal responsibility treats him like a martyr every time he is legally forced to take any personal responsibility. The idea that he could retake the White House seems absurd, but so did the idea that he could win in 2016. He could go to jail and his base would just be that much more motivated to vote for him. Meanwhile, support for Biden seems as tepid as ever. And then there's this whole Project 2025 thing, that far-right plan for a Christo-fascist takeover of the federal government that Trump has voiced his support for, and leftist lawyers say is feasible if Trump wins next year. Am I catastrophizing? It seems like our entire country is teetering on the edge of a cliff, and very few people seem concerned. Well, you are catastrophizing a little, but you bring up the best reason why concerns like yours should not be dismissed and should still be considered and taken seriously. And that's 2016. We can't forget 2016, where we were all, not all of us, but a lot of us were convinced, oh, Hillary's going to walk away with this. This is going to be fine. Like, Hillary isn't the ideal candidate for a lot of us. Maybe she's, a little more she's too much of a centrist in a lot of ways and not as liberal or left leaning as we would like. But, she's going to be president. She's going to be fine. And Trump's not going to be president. We have nothing to worry about here. We're going to elect Hillary Clinton and everything's going to be fine. And then that didn't happen. And a lot of us were like, what the fuck just happened? Because it took us by surprise. So we can't forget that. We can't forget that. Especially those of us who didn't vote last time or who didn't vote in 2016. Not last time. Thankfully, we won last time. But if you didn't vote in 2016 because you thought, Hillary's going to win, it doesn't make a difference anyway. I mean, they're not going to elect Trump, right? You have to vote this time, okay? Whether you vote, hopefully you voted last time and you voted for Biden, but now you got to vote for Biden again. See, you have to vote for, hey, look at me. You have to vote for Biden again. I know maybe you don't like him. Maybe he's not your favorite guy. He's done a lot of things that I wish he hadn't have done, and he hasn't done a lot of things I wish he would have done. There's lots of stuff about him that makes me upset. There's lots of things about him that make me frustrated. There's lots of times I wish that somebody other than him was president, not Trump, but somebody other than Biden from our side, right? but he's the guy. He's running. He's almost certainly going to be the nominee again. So 2024, November, election day, vote for Joe Biden. You have to vote for Joe Biden. Are you listening to me? Are you fucking listening to me? Because if you don't, Donald Trump is going to win. See? That's how this works. So yeah, and if Donald Trump wins this time, it's going to be way worse than last time. So, and then you won't be catastrophizing. Then you'll be like, see, I fucking told you so. So I don't think we should be like running around with our hair on fire or sky is falling, all is lost, all is lost. But we need to stop that from happening. We need to win the next election. We need to reelect Biden. I mean, unless something changes in an unforeseen way and he's not the Democratic nominee, in which case we need to elect whoever that person is. So, I mean, we need to keep these things in mind, you know, because, yes, so the worst can happen. I hope it won't. It probably won't. I'm thinking maybe, probably. I don't know. But it's not just going to take care of itself. You know, we need to take care of it. So I think your concerns are things we need to keep in mind and not just brush off and say, that's not going to happen. Don't worry. You're blowing it out of proportion. You know, just relax. No, don't fucking relax. That's what happened last time. Or that's what happened in 2016 and look what happened. So, you know, people should be more concerned. People should not be like, you know, drawing up their last will and testament, but people should be more concerned. Absolutely. Because we need to stop it. Marai Ziller, hey Steve, I'm going to ask a stupid question, so feel free to treat it as stupid. I can't remember how to suggest a topic for a Trek Actually video, but I'd like to suggest one. Is new Trek actually less episodic than older series? And if so, is that actually a bad thing? I think it'd be good to see your insights there. I'm mostly with you in the whole good story is a good story and canon can go jump. But with series long story arcs becoming more of a thing, it would be interesting to hear your take. Not in an answer here, but in a video, if I could be so bold. So I'd like it to get put up to a vote. Again, my apologies as I've forgotten the correct process to go through. Love your videos, especially the one you did for me, and still one of the first channels I check on each day. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And of course, thank you most of all for being a supporter and continuing to be one. That's a really good topic. I will think about that and come up with maybe a pithier way to phrase it. But yeah, I will make a note and add it to an upcoming topic poll, and we'll see if it gets voted and selected. Because I do think it's a good topic. The idea, you know, I like talking about things like that. I like talking about like formatting and writing and you know how the effect that has on how we receive the material and how we engage with it. So that's a good topic. Thank you for the suggestion. And I will see about putting it on a future poll for sure. Agent Meister, who is beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination. Peldor Joy, Steve, can you believe it's been over 30 years since the Batman saga Nightfall was first published? I missed the original run, but was lent the graphic novels by a neighbor I was in school with. This story will always have a special place in my heart, as it was my first experience of the monthly Batman comics. Up until then, all I had experienced were the Burton Schumacher movies and the various TV shows. I have read the whole series several times since, and I always find something new to enjoy about it. What can be said about Bane that hasn't been said before? An absolutely amazing character. Azrael, on the other hand, doesn't seem to get as much love. Apparently, he wasn't very popular, but I thought he was a great idea. Bruce, having left the mantle of the Bat to this new protege, must fight to reclaim it from someone who has become a psychotic brute. I could go on forever about this story, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And did you ever read the monthly Azrael comic? Okay, so yeah, I pardon me while I turn to dust here, but I read Nightfall and then subsequently Night Quest and Night's End. I read them as they came out month by month. Nightfall was mostly in Batman and Detective Comics. I subscribed to both of those back then, and I read it all as it came out. And was, you know, I just devoured it. It was great. I mean, I was 13 and 14 when it was coming out, and I thought it was great. And looking back on it now, I still admire it a great deal. I I wouldn't put it up as like one of the great Batman stories ever told, but it certainly has its place in Batman history and in comics history. It's amazing that the writers of the Batman comics were able to basically do their version of the Death of Superman storyline, like right after that storyline had happened. And in a way that in terms of the plot is extremely similar. Like a lot of the major plot beats of the Nightfall story arc are virtually identical to the big plot beats of the Death of Superman storyline. I mean, Batman doesn't die, he gets his back broken, but still, like, Bruce Wayne is no longer Batman and goes away and is replaced by a new guy who turns out to be bad news in the long term, just like with the Reign of the Supermen, where, Cyborg Superman turns out to be a bad guy in the long run. And then eventually the rightful Batman, or the rightful Superman, comes back and reclaims his mantle, and, and everything is right with the world again. But Nightfall was great. And I say Nightfall meaning the entire saga: Nightfall, Night Quest, Night's End, the whole thing. I loved it when I was a kid, when I was reading it, and I have a soft spot for it now. And yes, I did read the monthly Azrael comic. I loved the monthly Azrael comic. I didn't read the entire run. I read maybe the first 2 years, and then kind of dropped off of it. But I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was really cool that Denny O'Neil was writing a monthly comic at that point, because he had mostly moved into an editorial position and wasn't really right. I mean, he would write the occasional special or the occasional thing now and then, but Azrael was the only regular monthly comic that he was writing at the time, and that he had written for a while at that point. And I thought that was really cool. Here's a Denny O'Neil comic, and not exactly a Batman comic, but on the sort of outskirts of Batman. It's kind of a Batman-ish comic, was Azrael. Was considered part of the Batman editorial family. And the artwork for the first couple years was by an artist named Barry Kitson, who I was a huge fan of. Still love Barry Kitson's art. So I liked Azrael as a character, and I liked Azrael's monthly comic. I was a fan of it for the first couple of years. And like I said, I kind of dropped off, and I kind of got out of reading monthly comics just in general after a few years after Nightfall had resolved. But yeah, I did read the Azrael comic, and I was a big fan of it for a while. Isaiah Taylor, so Halloween is right around the corner, and you know what time it is: horror movie time. But as we flock to movies like Carrie and Friday the 13th, I've seen plenty of movies that have horror motifs in them. Take 1984's Terminator, the plot being a human-looking cyborg from the future who blends in with the general population who stalks its prey. Remember, the T-800 kills 2 unrelated Sarah Connors before attempting to kill the Linda Hamilton one. Not to mention the fact that the world of Terminator is a post-apocalyptic hellscape where humans are being hunted towards extinction. Also, the synthesizer music in the Terminator movies is something that is unparalleled in cinema. It's truly depressing and sad, a bleak tone. Or what about the 1984 BBC film Threads, which depicts a nuclear attack on the British city of Sheffield? That movie made me sick to my stomach, and I had trouble sleeping. It will definitely give The Day After a run for its money. Do you agree, Steve? Well, I've never seen Threads, so I can't comment on that. I can't agree or disagree with you about that. But yeah, the original Terminator does have a lot more of a horror movie kind of edge to it than Terminator 2. I mean, and honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why Terminator 2 made so much more money. I mean, the original Terminator is a great movie, but the Terminator is a villain, and it's not quite a horror movie, but it has some horror movie elements, like you say. And Terminator 2 is a lot of the same ingredients and, same actors, but instead of sort of a horror / suspense sort of thriller story like in the original Terminator, it's a big epic action adventure movie, and it's just a lot more fun and a lot more broad, and and it made all the money in the world. And not that the original Terminator made money too, but not like T2 did, and I think that was a big reason for it. Horror movies, there are, every year it seems, there are big hit horror movies, but for the most part, horror movies do not become like major blockbusters. Horror movies can be successful and make money, but usually on a much smaller scale. And, and maybe it's analogous to the scale at which the Terminator was profitable compared to the scale at which T2 was profitable. It's completely different world, but they were both profitable in their own way and at their own level. But yeah, I agree with you about the Terminator, and I have not seen Thread, so I can't comment on that. But thank you for hipping me to it. If I remember, I'll try to watch it. Joe McClory, damn it, I hate this. Living in late 2001, experiencing the buildup to the invasion to Iraq. Israel is not bombing terrorists. They're bombing people. The failure of so much of the media to acknowledge the humanity of the community that is experiencing a genocide. Their failure to express the smallest of pushback against war crimes is infuriating. And not only that, but turning against the calls for restraint, calling those that speak out anti-Semitic, it almost feels like gaslighting. How can they not see that what is happening is wrong, that no act could justify this collective punishment, and that even if they were right about this being necessary to defend Israel, and it is not, that the moral price would still be too high? Oh yeah, question. I guess my question is, could you please reassure me that I am not going crazy? Wait, I know which I support Israel. Wait, I know which I support Israel statement upset you the most. I know there have been a few. What was one? There was an open letter that was released the other day that a bunch of famous people signed. That was, very pro-Israel, and then it had just sort of the standard lip service about Palestinians and civilians and stuff, but it was mostly just, hey, Israel should do what it needs to do, but also civilians, but Israel needs to do what it needs to do. And I think one of the signatories was Jordan Peele, and a lot of people were sort of like, oh man, not Jordan Peele. That's the only one I can think of. I haven't really been paying a whole lot of attention to that part of it. But that's the one that comes to mind. But no, and I can reassure you, are not going crazy. This is a cycle. I mean, the state of Israel does these things every so often, and it does seem like the response is always the same. Hamas or some other terrorist group will attack people in Israel. The government of Israel will go completely overboard and do a completely out of proportion response and kill civilians and engage in what I think is fair to call collective punishment. Whether they see it that way or not, whether they intend it to be that way or not, it's collective punishment on the Palestinians. And the excuse is, well, we're going to destroy their capacity to do this, right? Like that's the line from the IDF right now. It's like, oh, we got to do this to destroy Hamas's ability to operate. Okay, well, that was what you wanted to do last time too, and it didn't work. And the time before that, and it didn't work either. And the time before that, and it didn't work that time either. So, like, how many civilians do you have to kill, along with all your other supposedly more legitimate operations, before you finally succeed and do destroy Hamas and other organizations that are acting against you and threatening you, right? Or you figure out that what you're doing and have been doing isn't working, and you need to figure out some other way to deal with this. Like one of those two. Either you're going to succeed finally after all these decades of killing civilians en masse, you're finally going to accomplish your stated military goal, which you haven't yet, or you're going to realize that this is not the way to go about it, that you're just slaughtering people and you're not actually gaining anything from it. Maybe you'll try something else. And again, well, like I said earlier, what that something else is, I don't know, but there's got to be something else. So yeah, no, you are not crazy. You are not crazy. Brian Baker. Steve, it's been a difficult week, political and socially. Another shooting with multiple deaths and a maggot elected to Speaker of the House. So I have a serious question for you this time around. How do you escape the desperate times? What do you watch or read to help you adjust? Also, is there any silly thing, an episode of any television show or a movie that helps you adjust? I've taken to watching a Twilight Zone episode called where Rod Serling. Oh, you didn't put in the title. I guess you forgot, but is it Oh, I forget the name of it now. But it's the season 1 finale. Yes, the one where Rod Serling gets removed from the show by a writer who tape records his character descriptions and the character comes to life. I cannot think of the name of that episode for the life of me, but yes, I know exactly which episode you're talking about. It is Rod Serling's first appearance on camera in the Twilight Zone. He narrated the first season episodes, but he did not actually appear on camera in the first season until the end of this episode, when he appears and is then subsequently erased by the writer character. And I can't think of the name of it. I'm sure people in the chat are looking it up or have a, have better recall about it than I have and are saying it right now. But, I mean, I have shows that I have shows that I watch normally, and I have a routine that I follow in terms of work and watching stuff on TV and what have you. And I work out and I go for walks, and I just have a normal routine that I follow that keeps me going and keeps me from getting too obsessed or too preoccupied with the doom and gloom, but also allows me to, to still pay attention to stuff and not like wall myself off from it, because I think it's important to stay informed and stay politically active. And, I don't think you should just stick your head in the sand and pretend that these things aren't happening. That only enables more things like that to happen. But yeah, I mean, yeah, sometimes I'll watch a Star Trek show. Sometimes I'll watch, an old episode of the Adam West Batman TV series, or an episode of MacGyver, or sometimes maybe an episode of the Twilight Zone, because that's also one of my favorite shows ever. I love the Twilight Zone. Watch wrestling, something like that, that allows me to enjoy something and take my mind off of it, or provide a catharsis in some way, to make me feel better, or to make me feel like there's some point to this or some hope to this. There are various things that I do. And yeah, I mean, watching the Twilight Zone is a good one. Watching the Twilight Zone is a good way to deal, because even after all these decades, it is still an incredibly prescient show, and still one of the best TV shows ever produced. So I would never recommend to not watch the Twilight Zone. This question is from Dana, who would have been fantastic on Tough Enough. Boy, I'll tell you something about that after I get through the question. Hello, Steve. I hope you've had a lovely week. Things are looking pretty grim around the world, with a hyper-conservative Republican elected as Speaker of the House, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Gaza. However, there are still some pretty delightful parts of life. I gave a test today, and my students did well on the practice work, so I felt pretty confident. But on the test, they did even better than I expected they would. So that was a lovely bright spot in my day, and it has helped the weekend start on a positive note. Along those lines, I remembered that you wore a Cody Rhodes shirt last Ask Away, but I also remembered that you've said that CM Punk is a better wrestler overall. So I was wondering, what makes someone, in this case Punk, a better wrestler? It's not just about landing the moves in the ring, because Cody can do that. And it's not just like he delivers his lines poorly when he's on the mic. So what are the details that make one wrestler great and another one phenomenal? Well, first of all, the Tough Enough thing. For those of you who are longtime wrestling fans, you may remember that WWE used to have a reality show called Tough Enough, where they would, people would come on the show and compete for a WWE contract. And Dana actually tried out for the first season of Tough Enough. Now, she didn't get chosen to actually do an in-person tryout, but she sent in a tape. She sent in a video. And I was actually, Dana and I have known each other for a very long time, and I was actually with her. She mailed her Tough Enough audition tape from Hagerstown, from the Hagerstown Central Post Office, and I was there, and I took a picture of her doing it, and I still have the picture. And yes, and she, I think she would have been great. I think she would have been great on Tough Enough. She certainly has the determination, and she certainly has the gift of gab in terms of doing a promo. So yeah, I think she would have been great. But okay, what makes CM Punk a better wrestler than Cody Rhodes? I am wearing a CM Punk t-shirt, as you may notice. It's very subjective. It's very difficult to put into words. And it's a lot of it has to do with my own personal preferences as a fan. I love Punk. I love Cody. Cody is absolutely one of my favorite wrestlers. But The thing about CM Punk that makes him a great wrestler, both as a worker in the ring and as a talker on the microphone, and just the whole general package of Punk as a wrestler, what makes him great is it never looks like he's trying to do something. It looks like he's just doing what he's doing. He seems completely natural and completely authentic in everything he does. And it seems like that's really him. Now, you know intellectually that wrestling is a performance, and you know that he's not really fighting. Like, let's just say, let's take his last match before he got fired from AEW. Samoa Joe. He wrestles Samoa Joe at All In at Wembley Stadium. You know that him and Samoa Joe don't really hate each other. You know that him and Samoa Joe are not really mad at each other, are not really trying to hurt each other. And, you know, most basically of all, you know, they're not really like punching and kicking each other and trying to kill each other in the ring. You know, that's all a performance, and that they're cooperating with each other and working together. But in the moment when he's doing it, everything he does makes sense. Everything he does feels like what he would do. And it just seems like he's not overthinking it. He's not rushing to get into position. He's not in his head trying to think 3 moves ahead. Okay, what do I now? I need to do this so he can do this, and then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. And like, there's no, he's just doing it. He's just doing it. He's in the moment. That's what it feels like. I don't know if that's what it's like in his head. Maybe in his head, he's, you know, obsessive compulsive and he's thinking about every little beat that he has to hit, but it doesn't come across. Like, just watching it as a fan, he seems in the moment at all times when he is on camera, no matter what he's doing, when he's in front of the people. And that is such a wonderful and rare quality in any performer, but in a wrestler, you know, in addition to other kinds of performers. He just makes it look effortless, and he always looks relaxed. That's my favorite thing about watching Punk wrestle. He always looks so relaxed in the ring. He doesn't look worried. Like, he doesn't seem like he's worried he's going to mess up. He doesn't seem nervous about, you know, a big spot that he knows is coming up. He seems completely relaxed, completely at home. He never lets the audience throw him off. If the audience reacts in a way that is unexpected, or maybe that the guys in the ring might not want them to, if they start booing for something that they were hoping they would cheer for or whatever, never gets thrown. He's just in control and cool all the time. And it's not that Cody lacks those qualities, because Cody has all of that to a certain degree as well. But Punk just seems like he has just completely mastered it. And has always been my favorite thing about him as a wrestler. He just makes it look easy. It makes it look like he's making it up as he goes along. And as much as I love Cody, and as much as I admire Cody, and as much as Cody is my favorite of the guys working right now, there are times when you can see the gears turning in Cody's head. And there are times when Cody, especially when Cody does promos, you can tell, okay, he's worked this out ahead of time. You know, he's not necessarily reading a script that somebody else wrote for him. He's saying what he chose to say, but he's gone over this. He's done this in front of the mirror, maybe, you know, or he's workshopped this backstage, and he's crafted this in a very particular way. And he's kind of, you know, just doing it the way he wrote it. Punk doesn't seem like that. Punk, he comes out and he just, you know, it just flows. And so I think that would be what gives him the edge for me over Cody. But both phenomenal wrestlers. Kier is wondering who broke the world. What would have happened if Superman had crashed into the sun as a baby? Would he have died? Would the ship have exploded and detonated the sun? Would he become supercharged and without Kent guidance become a tyrant? Just a fun question to distract from wars and mass shooting. Okay, so it depends on which version of Superman we're talking about. If we're talking about original Golden and Silver Age Superman, like pre-Crisis Superman, I think baby Superman flies into the sun, and either the ship is completely fine and he just, he passes through the sun or manages to fly out of it and land somewhere else, or maybe the ship is destroyed, but Superman himself is okay, because even as a baby, he was still invulnerable, and maybe it would supercharge him or something. I'm not sure. If we're talking post-crisis Superman, like 1980s and 90s Superman, then if his ship flies into the sun, he's dead, because Superman doesn't have his powers as a baby. Superman's superpowers develop over time as he grows up on Earth, and he doesn't actually gain significant, like noticeable superpowers until he's a teenager. So if that version of Superman crashes into the sun, then he's just fucking dead. He's just dead. It might be interesting to think of, like, you know, the pre-crisis, like, Silver Age Superman missing Earth and crashing into the sun and growing to maturity, like out in the wilds of space, and then coming to Earth, not necessarily as a tyrant, but maybe just as like a wild man. You know, he's just, he hasn't been raised by parents who instilled in him any particular values. He hasn't been able to learn his Kryptonian history, because he never makes the Fortress of Solitude, or he never figures out how to access any information on his spaceship or whatever. He's just kind of grown in the wastes, in the interstellar wastes of space, and just becomes this superpowered wild man who maybe eventually finds his way to Earth and wreaks some havoc before he can be stopped. I don't think he would necessarily be a tyrant. He would just be kind of feral. But that might be an interesting possibility too. But no, I don't think he would be the Superman that we know without the Kents. I think that is something that is definitely an important part of your question. And finally, last question from Russell, who says, "Hey, Steve, I trust you are well. Have you been?" I have been well, thank you. "I wanted to clarify a couple of things. That social worker," and this is from Russell's question from last time, "that social worker who was shot didn't die, but was shot just the same. And I understand sending someone like him out to the house rather than a cop. But my point was, since the guy made threats of using a gun, he should have been accompanied by law enforcement. Anyways, I'm sure you have heard what has happened in Maine, and it does beg the question. If we stop guns from being owned by law-abiding citizens and we defund the police, what's there to protect us from criminals who will get a gun no matter what and commit these types of crimes?" That was sort of my point. In 2 weeks, I want to come back to Star Trek because I saw a beautiful essay of how one views TOS, TNG, DS9, and Voyager. They omitted Enterprise because it's a prequel, and this was in regards to progression in Star Trek. They also admitted New Trek, not sure why, but the essay itself was great. So in 2 weeks, I will discuss that. Thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Please do ask that question next time. So where do criminals get guns? Like, here's the thing. A lot of the rhetoric toward gun control in this country on both sides is oriented toward the idea of keeping guns out of the wrong hands, or if you are on the pro gun control side, the alarmist, fear mongering take is they'll keep guns out of the hands of law abiding citizens, like you say in your question, and then people won't be able to defend themselves from the criminals who will still have guns. And my position is we should be enacting policies and taking steps to keep guns out of everybody's hands. Everybody's hands. Criminals and law-abiding citizens and police, for the most part. I don't advocate for police departments being completely unarmed, but I do think it would be a good idea for just, ordinary cops on patrol to not automatically be armed. I think that'd be fine, so that every single cop that turns up anywhere in response to anything isn't automatically packing heat. Because when you introduce a gun into a situation where a gun is not already there, you instantly make that situation more dangerous. So if a cop shows up to an incident that, maybe it's someone having a mental health crisis, maybe it's, someone getting violent, but there's not a gun involved. Now all of a sudden there is a gun involved because the cop has a gun. Now, all of a sudden, the situation is much, much, much more dangerous than it was before, just by the virtue of that cop and his gun being there. So I'm an advocate for disarming police in terms of general patrol, but, we could still have specific teams of police that are trained to respond to dangerous, violent situations where a firearm is called for, but they will not be the ones that are just pulling people over and doing traffic stops and stuff. And it also includes not just keeping guns out of the hands of criminals and law-abiding citizens, but also taking guns away from people who have them. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, government agents breaking down people's doors and confiscating their guns by force, which is again the right-wing fear-mongering thing. But doing things like a continuous gun buyback program that is federally funded so that people can basically sell their guns to the government and be paid a fair market price for them. And then those guns are destroyed, or ending these ridiculous policies in a lot of red states where it is actually illegal for local police departments to destroy crime guns when they are no longer needed for evidence. Like, they can't destroy them. They have to either keep them or resell them and return them to circulation. They cannot destroy these guns, which is ridiculous. I think the problem is that there are too many guns, period, in the population. And we need to be reducing the number of guns in the population. Criminal, law-abiding, whatever. There need to be fewer guns accessible to anybody. So it's not just about, and if there are fewer guns being manufactured and there are fewer guns just extant in the population, then it will be a lot more difficult for criminals to get guns. Because where are the guns going to come from? If we destroy guns that are confiscated by the police once they are no longer needed as evidence for crimes, if we encourage people who do have guns to hand them over to the government in exchange for money, and then we destroy those guns and we reduce the number of guns that are just out there in anybody's hands or anywhere, then it will be more difficult for criminals who want guns to get them. And that's what I advocate for. And again, we're a long way off from that. That's not even politically feasible at this point because the gun lobby has so controlled the narrative for so long. But I feel like that is the direction we need to be moving in, and I am not dissuaded by if you outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns argument. I do not buy that at all. If we go about it correctly, that will not be nearly as much of an issue as the NRA and other like-minded organizations would like us to believe. So that's it for the patron questions. Thanks to everybody who is a patron and a channel member. I could not do this without you. I appreciate you so much, and I especially appreciate the wonderful questions. Now, I'm going to turn my attention to the live chat for the rest of the show, but first, I'm going to show everybody a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. This will go up on its own as a YouTube short on my channel tomorrow afternoon. But because you are watching live on Ask Away, you get to see it before anybody else. So here we go with a brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Please enjoy. Do you remember the sham vag? That sex toy I got as a gag gift a few years ago?
You mean the one you bought for yourself after you got divorced?
As a gag gift, yes.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of how many times I've used it.
What for?
What else do people use artificial vaginas for?
I meant, why are you trying to think of how many times you've used it?
I decided to sell it. I'm writing a Craigslist ad. I thought I should give some indication of how used it is, Like the mileage on a car.
What does the ad say so far?
For sale, well-loved love toy.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. Clean, still reasonably tight, lightly chewed.
I think you're good.
Okay. Ta-da! There's the Stuffy short. Hope everybody enjoyed that. I only have one Stuffy short left to go. So I'm going to have to, I have a bunch more written that I haven't shot. So I'm going to have to get on the ball and shoot some more Stuffy shorts, hopefully this coming week. Not this weekend, because I have a bunch of videos to shoot this weekend, to actually, next Monday and Wednesday videos, but I have some scripts for upcoming Stuffy shorts ready to go that I need to get on the ball because I've only got one left. So anyway, let's see what's going on in the chat. Let's see here. I got a super chat here from Luck Dragon. Thank you, Luck Dragon. That says, wanted to comment on people's views of Star Trek. To me, we can't be gatekeepers and understand that our views will always differ, such as I personally hate Discovery, but love Strange New Worlds based on writing and directing. Yeah, that's fair. That's completely valid. It's completely valid. I mean, people like what they like. You know, that's something that Jason and I say on late seating a lot. Like what you like, you know. Sequence 77 says, Steve, I'm wondering if you have watched Superman and Lois. I'm curious about your thoughts on this version of Superman. I feel that he is much closer to the idealistic character than I was expecting. I'm a big fan of Superman and Lois. Yes, I love Superman and Lois. I have been a fan of it since the first episode. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. And 255 AD says, I feel like you misunderstood my question a bit. I think they understand that there's good and bad art, but for them, understanding what dictates that is like a dog trying to understand math. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you're making a slightly, like a subtler point there than I guess I was, than the one I responded to. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Whether they understand it or not, I don't think they care. I mean, yeah, I don't think studio executives care whether a movie is good or not, and they are not equipped to be able to discern why people think a thing is good versus thinking a thing is bad. Mr. KDW1 says, I would also suggest that gun destruction be televised so that the general public would not worry about said guns being kept by the government. Yeah, I'm all for that too. I'm all for that too. Fish Dude 666 iffy. 666 iffy. Steve, would you consider doing a collaboration with Betty Bowers as your honest Republican persona? That could be epic. I mean, I don't know Betty. I've never interacted with her. I mean, I know her work. Like, I mean, I've been a fan of hers for years, since before she was even doing YouTube videos. I mean, if she reached out to me and wanted to collaborate and we could come up with, you know, a funny idea for a video involving those characters, I would certainly be all for it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Betty's. Philip Kehoe, Sham Vag, not a real brand name, I'm pretty sure, but someone should get on that. No, actually, the Sham Vag, okay, so the stuffy shirt. Sham Vag is something I came up with, and it was actually, it was referenced previously in an old Stuffy episode, a Steven Stuffy episode from several years ago on the old version. And it actually, it's the video that features a guest appearance by the brilliant and wonderful Jason Harding as one of his puppet characters, who portrays a disreputable salesman who is masquerading as a doctor. And I contact the doctor for like an e-visit, you know, and I tell him that, you know, I have like a pain in my arm or something, and he diagnoses me as having being like a chronic masturbator or something, and he says, you need to get the Sham Vag. Because it's Shamilton Bunk is the character. So Shamilton Bunk has created a you know, a sex toy called the Sham Vag. So, you know, it's a bunch of different references in there, but yeah, so that's where the Sham Vag comes from. As far as I know, I made it up. 255 AD says, how many people, particularly boomers, do you think are just unaware of the concept of unconscious biases? I mentioned to my dad that I almost didn't think to buy some sports stuff for my brother's kids because they're girls. He was like, but you always talk about gender equality. I think a lot of people are unaware of it. Yeah, and I think a lot of people also, when they are informed of it, are resistant to the idea. Even though you would think like people who are really nervous and defensive about people thinking they're racist or being thought of as racist, you'd think they would be all about embracing the idea of unconscious bias. Because even though like you still should be responsible, once someone points out that you may be acting on an unconscious bias, like it's still your responsibility to do something about it and to change your behavior, but you are not directly to blame for it because it's an unconscious bias. You know, you're acting in a way that is improper, but that you weren't aware of and didn't have any control over up until that point. So, I mean, it's not exactly like a way to let yourself off the hook, but it's a way, it's not the same as saying, oh, you fucking racist, how dare you? And you think that people who are like super touchy about everybody thinking they're racist would be okay with that, would want to embrace that concept. But there's a lot of resistance to it when you try to explain it to people. Here's a member message from Kirok 2011 says, I think in my question and our current situation, how would you deal with this Maine situation? What would be the correct approach? Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't know, like, you can't just pass a law and say, okay, this will never happen again. Like, it's the gun violence problem in the United States is so serious and so widespread and so pervasive that even if we started implementing the kind of draconian gun laws that I would like to see, like right away, it would still probably take years for it to make a difference. And we would still probably see mass shooting events happen in the meantime, because like, to me, the problem is the number of guns that are in people's hands in general, right? And it will take a long time to reduce that number, even if we are actively trying to do it, which we are not right now. But even if we were, as a nation, actively trying to reduce the number of guns extant in the population, it will take a long time for that to, to yield a benefit. So, I mean, are there things we could do? Are there things that the people of Maine could do, the state legislature of Maine could do in the short term to prevent things like this from happening, or at least make things like this less likely to happen? Sure. I learned earlier today that Maine does not have a red flag law. They have what's called a yellow flag law, which has a couple of intermediate steps as opposed to a red flag law, where if a family member, under most red flag laws, if a family member believes that someone is on the verge of harming themselves or harming another person, they can directly ask a judge to take away that person's firearms. And Maine does not have one of those. Maine has a yellow flag law, not a red flag law. It's a more complicated process. So streamlining that, implementing a more, conventional red flag law maybe would help. Strengthening existing gun laws might help. Making the process of buying a gun more difficult would help. But it would not completely fix the problem, because the problem is there are too many guns in people's hands right now. It's not just people going out and buying guns they don't already have, although obviously that is also a problem. But the main problem that is the cause not just of mass shootings, but of the 40-some thousand total gun-related deaths that occur in this country every single year is the sheer amount of guns that are in people's hands all across the country. And reducing that number will take a very long time. And we haven't even gotten started. Knit and Crochet Tiger asks if I've seen Brightburn. I have not seen Brightburn. 255 AD says, way back I did a joke about Enterprise doing an episode on why the TOS monitors are big. There is actually a fan theory. It's so they can display stuff from multiple angles like a window. Oh, okay. And Michael, yes, I'm familiar with Project 2025. Yeah. It's like, these people are not our friends. These people are not our friends, and they're serious. If we give them the chance to do horrible, undemocratic, fascist shit, they will do it. So, Victor Hart says, what's my opinion on Stargate? I have only seen like the first episode of the TV series, and I mean, I liked it. Like I didn't, it's not like I watched the first episode and I was like, oh Jesus, I'm not watching this. Like I liked it, but I just never got around to watching the rest of it. So, I mean, maybe at some point I will. But I haven't yet. Here's another super chat from Luck Dragon. Thank you very much. As a retired Navy chief, I find it a slap in the face from Republicans that they passed the Kennedy Act to, quote, protect my right to guns without question. And it sickened me knowing the Maine shooting could have been prevented. Yeah. I agree. There's so much like the Republican solution is always, well, we need more guns. Like the cause of the problem is that there are too many guns, and the Republican solution is always, let's get some more guns in there. You know. Kirok says, how would I deal with this one shooter? I mean, honestly, I don't know enough about the circumstances to comment. I haven't read up on the details of the shooting, to be completely frank. So I don't know what I would have done or what could have been done to stop this specific shooting. And, and here's the thing. I mean, again, I don't know if this is such a situation or not, but there may be situations where in the future, even if we enact like sweeping and significant gun legislation in this country, like I would like to see, right? Even if we do that, there may still be situations where there are still incidents like this from time to time. That's not a reason not to do it. You know, I mentioned it a minute ago. There are 40,000 gun-related deaths in the United States every year. That's total. It's homicides, suicides, accidental deaths, all gun-related deaths. 40,000 a year, and that it's been like that for a it's been steadily at that level for years. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down a little. But it's always roughly in the 40,000 a year area, and it's not getting any better. Enacting the kind of gun legislation that I would like to see would lower that number. I don't know how much lower it would lower that number. I would like to think, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I would like to think once things like gun buybacks and destroying crime guns and, making it more difficult for people to buy new guns, once those policies are in place, I would like to think once the total number of guns that are out there shrinks enough that it will lower that number significantly. It probably won't lower it to zero, but that's not the point. Seatbelts did not end car fatalities, but we still have them, and we should still have them. Driver's licenses and speed limits did not end car fatalities. Drunk driving laws did not end drunk driving fatalities, but they significantly reduced them. And that's the way we should look at the gun issue. So even if, and again, maybe this is not the case, but even if it is, even if the nature of this crime in Maine, the Lewiston shooting, is such that there is nothing that could have been done to prevent it. And I think that probably is not the case, but let's just say it is. There are still 40,000 other gun-related deaths per year that could be prevented by stricter, common sense, rational gun laws. And if one mass shooting would not have been stopped by those, that is not an argument against those laws. 25AD says, the novel I told you about. Just for fun, imagine you're a Lucas Arts executive and someone pitches a novel about why there's humans in Star Wars. How would you react? If they were pitching it to me, I would thank them for their time, and then I would send them away, and I would not publish the book, because I think that's no. I wouldn't greenlight anything like that, because I think that's a waste of time, and because I think it panders to the pedantic region of the fan base that I would not want to pander to, that I would not want to, pay any special attention to. So no, if I were an executive and someone pitched that novel to me, I would turn it down. I would say, publish it on a fucking fanfic site, because we're not publishing it as long as I'm in charge. Yeah, Isaiah, The Crush. I remember The Crush, sort of. I don't know if I've ever actually seen it all the way through. Is that Is that Alicia Silverstone? And is Mark Wahlberg in that too, or am I thinking of another one? I can't remember. Super chat from CRPR. Don't know how. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. What about having background checks for 3D printers as they are used to make ghost guns? I wouldn't have a problem with that, or at least, you know, if there's some other sort of more narrowly applied background check that you could do just to specifically prevent people from using 3D printers to make ghost guns, like maybe have a background check before you make the patterns less readily available or something. But yeah, I'm all for regulating and preventing the manufacturing of ghost guns. Joe McClory says, question, given the difficulty of gun control legislation, would you think a cultural push might be better, making media where people that carry guns are weak and other such tactics? I'm all for that too. And you're right, there does need to be a cultural change. One of the reasons why the kinds of gun laws that we need to be passing are so difficult to pass right now is because of the state of the culture. And there does need to be a pushback against gun culture, against the glorification of firearms, against the almost religious awe that Americans hold toward guns. There definitely needs to be a cultural pushback to that. Absolutely. David Colby says, I recently found a fan project for Star Trek called The Edge of Midnight, and it's really great. Basically a Cold War history textbook, but instead of in real life, it's about the Klingon Federation. I think I've heard of this. I've never actually looked at it, but I think I've heard of it. The name sounds familiar. Alicia Silverstone and Carrie Elways. Yes, not. Well, what was the Mark Wahlberg one? There's a Mark Wahlberg, like where he was like a stalker or something. So that was a different movie. That wasn't The Crush. Yes, Carrie Elways, because he's like a teacher or something, isn't he? Or like a father, like the father, and Alicia Silverstone's the babysitter or something like that. Like I said, it's been a while since I saw it. Serendum Geek, yes, you bet correctly. I bet Steve would think it is pointless to write lore about that. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, my friend. 225AD says, the fan theory I told you about, do you think it's asinine some Star Trek fans try to explain the TOS monitors being Syrtes that way? Yes. Yes, I do. I think it's a waste of time to try and to explain any of that. Kurak 2011 with a super chat says, I have 2 daughters and a granddaughter. I wouldn't want anything to happen to them. I love them beyond life itself. I worry about their future. You missed my last super chat. Did I? I'm sorry about that. Oh, just because it wouldn't let me send this. Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Fear. That's it, Steve. Thank you. Yes, the Mark Wahlberg one was Fear. Anyway, so Kira, yeah, I don't see how you loving your daughters and granddaughter has anything to do with not being comfortable with gun control. Having a gun around makes your granddaughter and your daughters less safe. That's a statistical fact. Having a gun around, whether it's their gun or someone else's gun, having a gun in the situation, having a gun in the house, having a gun on their person, whatever, having a gun in the situation makes them less safe. Period. So if your argument is, I care about the safety of my kids and my grandkids, then you should be in favor of gun control, and you should be in favor of reducing the number of guns in the population, and of making it more difficult for people to buy guns, and of changing the rabidly pro-gun culture of this country, because having guns around makes people less safe. A journalist, yes, there you go. Yeah, I knew Carrie. Yeah, Carrie always was like the older man. 285AD says, you ever feel a sense of futility when Palestine comes up? Everyone knows how progressives feel, but no one in power cares. Yeah, yes. I feel a sense of futility about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I feel a major sense of futility. Since we've been talking about it a lot, I feel a major sense of futility about the gun violence problem in this country. There are times when I do feel kind of hopeless about it. That's one of the reasons why I haven't gone out of my way to read up on the details of this most recent shooting, because I think, what's the fucking point? I mean, like, I'm not going to give up. I'm still going to talk about things and try to advocate for what I think we should do, but it's incredibly discouraging. Yes, I feel a powerful sense of futility about that. Boxy Brown 6900 says, what would your penalty be for gun possession? I mean, I don't know. I can't really speak to specifics about it. I think the way it would probably have to work is, I mean, I don't think you couldn't pass a law and you couldn't just pass a law right now and say, okay, from now on, gun possession is illegal and everybody who owns guns is in violation of the law. Like, that wouldn't work. You would have to enact policies that would make it difficult for people to acquire more guns and encourage people to give up the guns they have. So I don't necessarily know if punishing people simply for possessing guns would be the best way to do it. Now, you could say, well, from now on, you have to, pass a safety course and have a license to own a gun. And once the law passes, let's say you have 1 year after the law goes into force to acquire that license. And if you don't, then after that point, you're in violation of the law and you can be, fined or maybe it's, some kind of, jail term or so. I don't know. I don't know. But I think the punitive measures would not be the main driving force of getting people to not have guns anymore. I don't think that would be very effective. David Colby says, if I was in charge, I'd say that TOS technology uses vacuum tubes and magnetic tape reels, and it worked just fine. And all this duotronic bullshit is pandering to these 23rd century babies. Oh, that's good. I mean, I would say, well, the show was made in the 60s. So fucking get over it, you fucking nerds. Why do the monitors look that way? Why do they have CRT? Because this fucking show was made in the 60s. Fucking get over it. It's a TV show. It's made up. Jesus fucking Christ. Sorry, Seth, but we're on the same wavelength. Having a gun makes everyone less safe statistically. Kirok, okay, listen, dude. I'm trying to be patient with you here. Do you think if your children or someone you care about is out in public and there is and a mass shooter starts popping off, is your argument for lax gun control that you think that either your one of your daughters will be packing heat or there will be some civilian in the crowd packing heat who will take down the shooter? Because that almost never happens. That almost never happens. Like, I'm sorry. That's not a rational argument, man. That's not a rational argument. If your argument is, well, I don't want there to be gun control. I want there to be people in public carrying guns around on the off chance that a mass shooting starts while one of my kids is around, that good guy with a gun will be able to protect my daughter and granddaughter. That's not a rational argument, man. And it's certainly not a rational argument for not having sensible gun control like every other fucking developed country in the world. I mean, look, there's people I care about too, right? We all have people we care about. But putting more guns into the hands of more people does not make the people we care about safer. There are many situations, actually, where putting guns in the hands of trained police officers does not make people safer. So I'm sorry. I get that you love your kids and your grandkids. Good, you should. I love my family too and my friends. I would be devastated if someone I cared about was hurt or killed in a mass shooting or any other kind of tragedy, right? But it doesn't change the fact that having more guns in the hands of more people makes everyone less safe, including the people you care about. So this fucking fantasy of, well, but if, you know, if my grandkids are at the Walmart and somebody walks in and starts shooting everybody, there should be another guy in Walmart to shoot the guy who starts. That's a fucking fantasy. And I'm not going to say it's never happened, because once in a blue moon, you might hear about a mass shooting that was prevented or cut short because there was some guy, some civilian in the store or at the post office or wherever it is with a gun who was able to take the shooter out before he did too much damage. It's not like that's never, ever happened, but it has happened so infrequently that it does not bear serious discussion as a solution to this problem. That's right, Isaiah. The Iron Giant hated guns. That's correct. He did. 255 AD. Yeah, I understand. I mean, ignorance is bliss, as they say. 255 AD says, I envy my conservative dad sometimes. He's so blissfully happy in his retirement. It must be so mentally peaceful to have those beliefs, even if they're hate. Yeah, it's, you know, it's ignorance is bliss. And I'm sure it is blissful. David Colby says, as The Onion says, nothing could be done to prevent this, says the only country where this regularly happens. Exactly. And it's one of the most devastating acts of satire that The Onion has ever done, is that they reprint that story every time there is a mass shooting in this country, and all they do is change the location. And other than that, it's the exact same story. And it's always the same headline. Nothing we can do to prevent this, says only country where this regularly happens. I saw that. Isaiah had a typo, yeah. The Iron Giant hated Gus. An astronaut named Gus. Well, Boxy, I think maybe enacting harsh penalties for gun possession for people who are in violation of like licensing or those kinds of things, I think that might need to happen. But I'm just saying, I don't think the main driving force of any sort of policy designed to reduce the number of guns in the population, I don't think the driving force of that policy is going to be punitive. I just don't think that's going to work. I think the hardcore gun nuts are going to dig in even more, and they might even actually attract sympathy from less hardcore gun nuts who are going to say, yeah, they're not taking my guns either. You know, I think it needs to be more of a carrot than a stick sort of approach. But I mean, if people find themselves in violation of policies that are enacted to ensure responsible gun ownership, and they are just stubbornly remaining in violation of the law, then yeah, I think there do need to be harsh penalties in those cases. But I don't think it should be the main function of the law. Oh, Steve, I will definitely talk about the Bigfoot episode of MacGyver. Yes, absolutely. The next MacGyver video is going to be about the Christmas episode, and it'll be in December. Go figure. But after that, I'm not sure when the next one after that will be, but there are so many great MacGyver episodes to talk about. And I will definitely be talking about the Bigfoot episode for sure. Some Random Geek says, is there a patron and member hangout this Sunday? And are you cool with Vovacat joining this one and all future hangouts? Yes and yes. If Vovacat is available and wants to come, I am completely in favor of that. And yes, there is a hangout this Sunday starting at noon Eastern, and I will post about that on my Patreon and my members only feed on the YouTube channel this weekend to remind people of it. David Colby says, also more random fun StarCraft 2 facts. Not only did it have John Delancey hamming it up as an evil alien, it also had Michael Dorn as a space wizard and Claudia Christensen. How about that? It was like a Star Trek / Babylon 5 crossover. Fantastic. Kirak with the super chat says, I don't own a gun. I don't want a gun, but I support those who do with a purchase permit and concealed carry permit. Okay, well, I don't. And I'm telling you, there is no logical reason for you to support it either. Because it doesn't make anyone safer, including your daughter and granddaughter. Like, that's a statistical fact. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, the justification that you have for people for people carrying concealed weapons in public is a fantasy, is a thing that almost never happens. So, yes, Warren, that's a good point. Yes. When Reagan was governor of California, he suddenly became a supporter of gun control when the black folks started arming themselves. And it was like, well, we can't have that, can we? And all of a sudden he was all for gun control. Yeah. Yes, Knit and Crochet Tiger, I remember that Quantum Leap episode. 225 AD says he's taken up carpentry since he retired from the police. Sometimes I say to him, do you not wish we lived in an economic system that let you do that your whole life? Right? Checkmate. Checkmate, Dad. Yeah, sequence 77, exactly. Like it's as simple as that. Now, it's not very simple anymore in the United States to get into that kind of scenario. But if we can get to that point, that's obviously the safest place. Sequence 77 says no gun in your vicinity means no chance of getting shot. Thanks, Steve. I do. I'm Rich Little-esque in my powers of impersonation. Reagan is easy. You just do kind of a low, like a hushed kind of whisper, and just sound confused. Well, and just say well, because well was sort of a stall word that Reagan would use. They would ask Reagan like a really serious technical question, and he would have no idea what they were talking about. Well, I think you'll have to ask my Secretary of State about that. Oh my God, Dana, your battery's low. Oh my God. You should plug it in. You should plug in whatever the battery. If you're on your laptop, you should plug it in. Yeah, some random geek. That's a great point. Remember, the NRA said nothing about the Philando Castile case, even though he was in his legal rights to own that gun. Yeah, Clinton's pretty easy. Actually, I think my Clinton is probably better than my Reagan. Of course, my Clinton also sounds a lot like, you remember the character that I used to do on the Stephen Stuffy videos, Prospector Jones. He sounds a lot like this, but with Clinton, it's all about the tone, and it's all about the cadence. I feel your pain. I want you to know something, and I'm telling you the truth right now. It's the earnestness that makes it a Clinton voice. And this, doing this. Oh, Set Merc, you missed the cutoff by 1 minute, so I'll just post my question here, and I hope you hear it. Your Israel video, I believe, missed the point. Okay, well, yeah, I'm curious to see what you have to say. Yeah, BB, we all know Bill Clinton was easy. That's right. David Colby says, people keep telling me Ronnie R was super charismatic, but I just don't see it. It's like how critics in the 80s hated The Thing, utterly inexplicable to modern minds. With Reagan, I see it and I don't see it. I mean, if you compare Reagan to a lot of other politicians that came before him, then he was very charismatic. If you compare Ronald Reagan and the way, not just when he would give speeches, but the way he would react, like with interviewers and reporters and other world leaders and stuff, just sort of in off the cuff moments, he was way smoother than Nixon or Ford or pretty much any president other than Kennedy. I mean, he was just really good at that stuff. Now, if you compare him to Clinton or Obama, not so much. Or if you compare him to people outside of politics who are charismatic and articulate and, like really good with people, then, he's not super impressive either. But in the context of American politics in the early 80s, I can see why people were like, oh, he's the great communicator, because he was better than most other people who had done his job up to that point. Oh, John Burns with a super chat says, thoughts that Putin had a coronary? I hadn't heard that. Is that true? I'm hearing that for the first time. Well, if he did, I hope he fucking dies. Okay, Sentmark says politicians aren't relentlessly pro-Israel because they fear being called anti-Semitic. It's because they receive gobs of money from pro-Israel PACs and weapons manufacturers who sell weapons to Israel. Same reason Democrats are often feckless failures. They're paid to be by donors that support the status quo. I feel you often gloss over the dominance of corporate, and I think I can guess what the rest of it what you're going to say is, but I'll wait until you post the rest of it. David, that's true. FDR. Yeah. FDR I think was better than Reagan, but FDR was, 40 years before Reagan. So, Marcia Jostrovsky says, will you ever force Dana to watch TOS with you on Trek Reluctantly? No, Trek Reluctantly is going to remain a Deep Space Nine show. I mean, if we do it long enough that we finish Deep Space Nine and Dana wants to keep going and watch more Star Trek, it's possible we could do the original series because I don't think she's seen very much of that. But it's not. It's not in the planning at the moment. No. Sentmark, I agree with you, but also I think that simplifies things too much. I think saying like, well, the parties do what they do because they've been bought and paid for by X, Y, and Z. Like, I certainly think that money in politics has a corrupting influence, and I certainly think that the what you're saying about the amount of money that goes into politicians' pockets from pro-Israel groups is a part of it. But I think it's reductive to say, well, that's the answer, that's the solution. So I don't. And I mean, a lot of other people talk about that. And I try not to, to weigh that too heavily when I'm talking about politics, because honestly, I think there are other factors involved. And I do think, my explanation of it being due to anti-Semitism or fear of being called anti-Semitic, like that's reductive too. Like it's not all that. But I didn't hear a lot of people saying that. Like every time any politician does anything that we don't like, there's always a bunch of people saying, oh, they're bought and paid for by blah, 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 blah. right? People say that a lot. And, I'm sure there's a lot of truth to that, but you hear that analysis, such as it is, a lot. I didn't really hear anybody saying that anti-Semitism and the fear of being tarred as an anti-Semite unfairly plays a large role in the knee-jerk support for Israel that a lot of people have. So I focused my video on that. Yeah, and David Colby's point is valid too. Israel is a major colonial power, and that America uses it as a local ally to do shit in the Middle East. Yeah, that's also part of it too. Yeah, I think that's also part of it too. Oh, Michael, holy shit. Okay. I can't think of another example of like an answer to your question, right? I mean, I can't think of another example right now because I'm starting to wind down the show. But you mentioned the booth at the end, which I fucking love. I love that show so much. And yeah, so for anybody who's never seen the booth at the end, the booth at the end is about a possibly supernatural guy who sits in a booth in a diner, and he has like a book that he writes things down in, and he has the ability to make things happen. And people come to him and they tell him what they want, and he tells them, he gives them something to do in exchange. So he says, if you do this thing I tell you to do, then I will give you what you want. But the other part of the deal is you have to come back and tell me about it. And the whole show takes place in that booth, and it's just him interacting with the people that come to him. Like, you never see the things that they do. You only hear them talking about it to him. So it's pure conversation, and it's the least, like Michael says, it breaks the rules of show don't tell. It's the least cinematic thing you can imagine other than just having text on a screen for people to read, right? But it is riveting. It's one of my favorite shows. I think they only did 2 seasons of it, and it was in the early 2000s. But it's such a fantastic show. I love it so much. And anytime anybody mentions it, I have to gush about it because I just love it so much. And yeah, it does break the show don't tell rule. But, sometimes it's more compelling to use your imagination, But yeah. Oh, Matthew, you're just in time to hear me wrap up the show. So actually, I'm going to turn away from the chat for just a minute to do my ending spiel, and then I'll come back and answer a few more final questions, and then we will call it a night. And of course, don't forget, if you are a patron or a member, Sunday, this weekend, Sunday starting at noon Eastern, is our monthly hangout with patrons and members. So if you are a patron or a member or thinking about becoming one between now and then, and that sounds interesting to you, please join us at noon Eastern for the hangout, which will also be streamed live on YouTube as always. And I'll post about that over the weekend beforehand on my Patreon page and my members only community feed on the YouTube channel. So anyway, don't forget, if you want to support this channel, I still have one eye on the chat, Mighty Dave. Don't pull anything too crazy in there. Anyway, if you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and you want to help me continue to do it, one of the best ways to do that is by becoming a supporter of this channel with a monthly contribution. You can do it through Patreon by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives, or you can do it by becoming a channel member right here on YouTube by clicking the join button right here on the YouTube page. Either way really helps me out a bunch. And if you become a patron or a member at any level of support, from $1 a month on up to however much you want to give me, all patrons and all members at all levels get to submit questions ahead of time for Ask Away live streams. And those are always the questions that I answer in the first part of the show. So please do consider becoming a patron or a channel member, because I could not continue to do this without my patrons and my channel members. And also, don't forget, as Some Random Geek was reminding us, he posted some links in the chat, and he's doing it again. Don't forget charitylinks.page, which Geek is kind enough to curate and maintain for us, that has links in there of friends of ours who need a helping hand. So if you have a few extra bucks to spare and you want to help somebody out, charitylinks.page, or one of the specific links that Geek is throwing into the chat right now, please consider making use of those and helping out some people. Also, don't forget, if you enjoy my YouTube work, I am also a co-host on a couple of excellent podcasts, which are a part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. There is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host alongside the great Jason Harding, where we take a look at classic films and see if they deserve their reputation, be it good or bad. And our next episode of Late Seating is the second of our annual 2 Halloween-themed shows. And for the new episode, Jason and I are reviewing the classic 1964 Japanese horror film Kwaidan, which is such a great movie. If you've never seen Kwaidan, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's 3 hours long, which is a bit long, but it's worth it. If you give it your attention and you sit with it and you allow it to reveal itself to you, it is just not only is it creepy and scary, it is just beautiful. So listen to our review of Kwaidan. And also, the other podcast I'm on is the Ensign's Log, which I'm on alongside Jason and the wonderful, amazing Dana Cole. And Dana and Jason and I play characters who exist in the Star Trek universe. We are currently serving on the TNG Enterprise, and our adventures kind of happen with the events of TNG sort of going on in the background of our lives. And our new episode of that goes up next week, but we're midway through our 5th season, if you can believe it. We are 5 seasons in to the Ensign's Log, and we are super excited to continue to do it, and we're having such a great time making the show. So if you enjoy funny Star Trek stuff, if you enjoy the Star Trek stuff that I do on this channel, please check out the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast that Jason and Dana and I do for you every other week, twice a month. We have an Ensign's Log coming up. All right, let me go back to the chat. Oh, I saw Luck Dragon. Yeah, that's the first I'm hearing of that. Richard Mole passed away, apparently. That sucks. That sucks. I was a big Night Court fan. And of course he was Bull Shannon on Night Court, and that's too bad. That's too bad. Not only was he great on Night Court, but he was a great voiceover actor as well. He did voices for a lot of characters on Batman the Animated Series. He did a lot of voiceover stuff, and of course, I mean, he had a fantastic voice. So yeah, rest in peace, Richard Mole. That's really too bad. David Colby says, as a final sign off, my favorite spooky film for Halloween is Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter. Have you seen it? And also, you should see it if you haven't. I don't think I have seen it, so I will make a note to see it. You know what else is good? Dracula, Prince of Darkness by not John Carpenter, by Terrence Fisher. All right, 5580. Let me go back and find some of your earlier comments. Let me see here. $255 AD said, I know you're not far left, but this is obviously his actual passion, but I sometimes like to imagine my dad would have spent his life doing carpentry if there was no capitalism. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us would have spent our lives doing a lot of things that we actually enjoy if there had been no capitalism. It's kind of sad to think about. 255 AD also says there's a short story that's The Thing from the Thing's perspective. The last line is the darkest thing I've ever read. Oh boy. The Thing decides it has to assimilate the human race for our own good. It says, these beings will never accept salvation. I must something it into them. I guess, what word is that? Rape, I guess? I must, yeah. That's, I mean, it's kind of a, I mean, yes, it's a very dark line. It's a very dark line, but it's also, it's kind of lurid, you know, kind of over the top, kind of, you know, sort of like self-consciously outrageous. Like, I actually don't think that's a very good line, but it's definitely dark. It's definitely dark. Yes, Geek. Yes, Richard Mole was Two-Face. He was Harvey Dent in Two-Face on Batman Animated Series. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Well, you know, David, if Donald Pleasance is in it, I mean, you're making it more and more likely that you're making it more and more likely that I'm going to watch it. I'll have to, you know, I'm familiar with its existence, but I don't think I've seen it, but I will make a note of it and try to see it. All right, that's it, everybody. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for being with me. Don't forget, this weekend, Sunday at noon, is the patron and member hangout. So I will see you for that. And hopefully we'll see some of you actually on the show with me, and the rest of you can watch if you want. And then I'll be back in 2 weeks for another one of these Askways. And of course, Wednesday next week, Dana and I will be back for another Trek Reluctantly, and we will be watching another episode of Agatha Christie's Poirot. So join us for that on Wednesday, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'll see you again for a bunch of other videos where I won't be live. I'll be pre-recorded and probably sound a lot more intelligent as a result. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining me. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And I will see you all when I see you. Take care.